They called her cursed, a barren ghost, a woman not fit to be wife nor mother. But one day, in a dusty Colorado town, a blacksmith hard as iron, and just as lonely, laid down his last coins to take her home. Why? Not for beauty, not for blood, but because sometimes, even in a place where fire eats through steel, a man sees more than the world dares to admit. Part 1. The Market Square. The spring sun was high, glaring down on the crooked roofs of the Colorado mining town. Dust rose in the square where wagons creaked, chickens scattered, and men leaned against posts with whiskey on their breath. The air smelled of sweat, iron, and the faint stench of coal drifting from the hills. At the center of the square stood a woman. Her name was Clara Barnes, though few cared to say it anymore. To most, she was simply the cursed widow. Her hands trembled as she clutched the thin fabric of her dress. No rope bound her wrists, no shackles held her ankles. And yet shame was a chain heavier than iron. Her head hung low, her eyes fixed on the dirt, as if the ground might swallow her whole. A voice rang out, sharp and bitter. Step up, step up. Here's a fine bargain for any man with coin in his pocket. The voice belonged to her father, once a proud mule trader, now bent and hollowed by debts and drink. His cheek sagged, his breath sour. He shoved Clara forward with the palm of his hand, making her stumble into the dust. Half the price of a mule, gentlemen, he barked. 25 years old, still has her teeth. She can cook, clean, mend, and keep her mouth shut. Only cursed in the womb ain't born a living child. But she's strong enough to carry wood and water. Who'll take her? A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. One man spat in the dirt and muttered, "What good's a woman who can't give a man sons?" Another chuckled, "I'd sooner buy a dry cow." Clara's cheeks burned. Behind her eyelids, she saw the wooden crosses she had left behind. 3 tiny graves on a hill, each marked with stones and silence. 3 times she had prayed. 3 times she had bled. And 3 times the world told her she was less than nothing. Women in the crowd turned away, whispering into each other's bonnets. Children peeked from behind their mothers' skirts, wide-eyed, curious, afraid. Her father sneered. $1? Maybe 2? Come now, she ain't got much use. But better than letting her starve. The crowd grew restless. A man with a red beard called out, "What's wrong with her, old man? Bad luck follows her, don't it?" "That's what I heard." Another jeered, "Best tie a bell to her neck so we all hear the curse comin'." The laughter was cruel, echoing against the clapboard buildings. Clara bit her lip until she tasted blood, but she did not speak. To speak was to give them more to mock. Then came silence, heavy, uneasy. A new sound cut through it, the slow, deliberate strike of boots against dirt. The crowd parted, just slightly, as Ethan Miller stepped forward, the blacksmith. He was a broad man, shoulders thick from years at the forge. His shirt bore stains of ash and sweat, his leather apron still dusted with soot. His face was rugged, framed by dark stubble, and his eyes, when he lifted them, were not cruel but weary, like a man who had seen too much fire and too little peace. Without a word, he reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. He dropped it onto the table with a dull clink of coins, enough to quiet the jeers, enough to end the bargain. The drunk father blinked. "You sure about that, Miller? She don't come with no refund. Can't promise she won't curse your house, too." And grade 71. Ethan's gaze held steady, his voice low, steady, like iron cooling in water. "She ain't cursed. She just needs a home." The words landed heavy in the air. Some scoffed, some muttered, but none challenged him. Clara's father shrugged, pocketed the coins, and shoved her hard enough to make her stumble toward Ethan. "Go on, girl. You're his now." She clutched the strap of her satchel. Inside was all she had left: a worn shawl, a cracked comb, and a Bible with her name faded on the inside cover. Her steps felt heavy, like dragging chains. Yet beneath the weight of shame was something else, a flicker, a breath of freedom she hadn't dared imagine. The crowd thinned, laughter already turning to gossip about the mine, the weather, anything else. Clara followed the blacksmith out of the square. The road stretched past the edge of town, where the air grew clearer, touched by pine. Ethan's mule cart waited, hitched to an old gray mare. He climbed onto the seat, not offering his hand, not demanding she hurry. He simply waited. Clara climbed up beside him, silent. He handed her a tin canteen. "Long ride," he said. The water tasted faintly of metal, but it was the first kindness she had been shown all day. They rode in silence. The prairie rolled out on either side, fields of dry grass bowing under the wind, fences leaning like weary old men. Above them, the sky stretched wide and endless, a canvas of pale blue fading into gold at the edges. Clara stole glances at him. His hands gripped the reins firmly, scarred from years at the forge. His jaw was set, his profile strong. He wore no wedding ring, only a nick across one knuckle, a reminder of work that never ended. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. "Why?" He did not look at her. "3 children," he said simply. "No mother, no time to find one the polite way." Her breath caught. "So I'm a governess?" "No." He flicked the reins gently. "Just someone not cruel. That's enough." The cart rocked as they crossed a creek bed. Clara held the satchel tighter, heart thudding in her chest. At last they reached the blacksmith's place, a small house attached to the forge, wood smoke curling from the chimney. The walls leaned a little, patched with boards. The yard was littered with wagon wheels and iron scraps. But it was not unkind. It was lived in. From the window, 3 children stared wide-eyed. A boy of 10, his face wary. A girl of 7, clutching a rag doll. And the youngest, no more than 4, his cheeks smeared with soot, his thumb in his mouth. Ethan nodded toward the porch. "This is Clara," he said flatly. "She'll be staying." The children did not move. Only the little one blinked, then ducked behind the curtain again. Ethan stepped inside, holding the door open without looking at her. "Rooms upstairs, suppers at sundown." Then he went straight to the forge, hammer ringing against steel. Sparks lit the dim air, sharp and bright. Clara climbed the stairs. The room was small but clean. A narrow bed, a wash basin, a single window that overlooked the field. She set down her satchel, sat on the bed's edge, and pressed her face into her hands. For the first time in weeks, no one called her cursed. But she did not yet know if this was mercy or just another prison. Part 2. First Struggles. The first morning in the blacksmith's house broke cold. The wind carried the smell of coal dust and pine needles through the cracked window. Clara lay awake on the narrow bed, listening. Downstairs came the clang of hammer on iron steady, relentless. Ethan Miller was already at work. She rose, fingers stiff with unease, and looked at her reflection in the wash basin's water. Hollow cheeks, eyes ringed with shadows. A woman who had been called cursed so often she almost believed it. She braided her hair tight, tucked the Bible under her pillow, and went down to face whatever waited. 3 children sat at the table. They stared at her as if she were a stranger wandering into their home, which, of course, she was. The oldest, Samuel, about 10, had his father's sharp eyes. He didn't blink, didn't smile. The girl, Eliza, 7, clutched a rag doll to her chest, lips pressed thin. The youngest, Peter, 4, sat with his thumb in his mouth, wide-eyed and wary. Clara forced a small smile. "Good morning." None answered. Samuel kicked at the table leg. Eliza buried her face in the doll's hair. Peter slid off his chair and ran out the back door, bare feet slapping the floorboards. Her chest tightened. They feared her. Or worse, they rejected her already. Ethan appeared from the forge, shoulders smeared with soot, a streak of sweat on his temple. He set a loaf of hard bread on the table, cut into rough slices. "Eat." The children grabbed pieces quickly. Clara reached for the knife to help, Her hand shook. The blade slipped, slicing her finger. A drop of blood welled up, staining the bread. Samuel sneered. She can't even cut bread right. Eliza giggled nervously. Clara's face burned. She wrapped the finger in her shawl, whispering, "I'm sorry." Ethan glanced at her, then at the children. His voice was quiet but firm. "It's only bread. No anger. No cruelty. Just simple words. Like a hammer striking iron, steady. Final." For Clara, that small mercy felt heavier than any insult. She blinked hard to keep back tears. The days turned into a rhythm of mistakes. She burned the beans in the iron pot. She spilled water trying to carry a bucket. The bread collapsed flat as stone. Each failure echoed in her chest like proof of the curse everyone believed. The children noticed. Samuel muttered, "She'll leave, like the others." Eliza whispered, "Papa should have picked someone else." And Peter clung tighter to Ethan's leg whenever she came near. Clara tried. She swept the floors, stitched socks, washed shirts stiff with soot. But her hands trembled too often. Her breath caught too quickly. At night, she sat on the bed upstairs, pressing her face into the pillow so no one would hear her sobs. One evening, she attempted stew. She stirred too quickly. The pot slipped, and hot broth splattered across the floor. The crash startled the hens outside. Samuel shouted, "She ruined supper!" Eliza clutched her doll, eyes wide. Clara froze, her hands dripping with broth, waiting for the shout, the slap, the punishment that had followed mistakes all her life. Instead, Ethan walked in. He bent, picked up the pot, set it on the table. His voice was steady. "It's only stew." No rage, no disappointment, just calm. For the first time in years, Clara's knees buckled with relief. She sank to the floor, cleaning with shaking hands. That night, she sat on the porch, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Ethan walked past her with the smell of iron still clinging to his clothes. He didn't speak, but he left the door open behind him, as though saying she belonged. Days stretched into weeks. Clara learned slowly. Her bread rose, once, twice, before collapsing, but less than before. She boiled water without spilling, though her arms ached. She hummed while mending socks, soft tunes from her childhood, though her voice trembled like a candle flame in the wind. The children still watched her with suspicion. Samuel tested her, leaving boots muddy on the floor. Eliza refused to eat unless Ethan told her to. Peter wouldn't sleep unless the rag doll was beside him. But one afternoon, when Ethan was hammering in the forge, Clara heard a cry, high-pitched, terrified. She ran outside. Eliza stood by the chicken coop, screaming. A snake coiled near her bare feet, hissing. Clara didn't think. She grabbed the nearest hoe and struck. Once, twice. The snake thrashed, then lay still. Eliza sobbed. Clara dropped the hoe and knelt, pulling the girl close. "It's all right, child. It's all right." For the first time, Eliza clung to Clara instead of the rag doll. Samuel appeared, eyes wide. He stared at the dead snake, then at Clara. For once, he had no sneer, only silence. When Ethan came, Clara stood pale and shaking, holding Eliza tight. Ethan looked at the snake, then at Clara, his voice low. "You kept her safe." "The Smerman," Clara nodded, unable to speak. That night, Eliza crept into Clara's room with the rag doll. She whispered, "You can hold her if you want," then slipped under the quilt beside Clara and fell asleep. Clara lay awake, tears sliding down her face. But they were not tears of shame. They were something else, something she had not felt in years. But the struggle was not over. The next week, Clara went to the market for flour. Whispers rose the moment she stepped into the square. "That's her, the cursed one," Miller bought. Laughter, snickers, and then, sharper than all the rest, a voice she knew too well. "Well, if it isn't Clara Barnes." The barren ghost. Her former mother-in-law stood by the dry goods stall, fan in hand, smirk curling her lips. Beside her was the new wife, young, smug, lace gloves stroking her stomach, as if already full of life. "She lost 3 babies," the old woman sneered. "Couldn't give us a squalling pup, worthless as a cracked jar." The younger woman added loudly, "I'll give him a son, a strong one, not like her." The crowd laughed. Heat rushed to Clara's face. She turned to leave, shame burning. Then a hand touched her shoulder. Ethan, dirt still on his boots, soot still on his shirt. He faced the 2 women, his voice low but unyielding. "She's the only one who can get my daughter to sleep. The only one who keeps food on my table. The only one who makes my house feel like home. You don't speak her name again." The crowd went silent. The women's smirks faltered. Ethan led Clara away without another word. On the wagon ride home, Clara stared at the horizon, throat tight. She whispered, "Why did you defend me?" Ethan didn't look at her. "Because you're mine to protect. That's enough." Her chest ached, but not with shame, with something frightening and tender all at once. That night, as she tucked Peter into bed, he whispered through sleepy lips, "Good night, Mama." The words struck her like a hammer on softened steel. Her breath caught. She kissed his hair, whispering back, "Good night, child." And for the first time in years, she believed she might not be cursed after all. Part 3. Turning Point. Summer in Colorado did not come gently. It came like a furnace, spilling down from the high mountains and pressing against the valley until even the stones seemed to sweat. The air shimmered above the dirt road. The forge groaned under the weight of its own heat. Chickens panted with beaks open. Dogs lay flat in the dust, unwilling to move. Even the children grew restless, their laughter thinning into silence. Clara felt the heaviness of that summer in her bones. She rose before dawn to fetch water, but by noon the buckets were warm to the touch. Bread dough soured too fast. Laundry dried stiff before it was wrung. The house itself seemed to sigh with the heat. And though she worked, though she pushed past exhaustion, she felt the fragile balance slipping like everything might crack under the sun's weight. It was during one such evening, when the sky burned red and purple, that Clara heard the sound. A cough. At first it was small, a child's complaint. But then it came again, harsher, echoing through the cabin. Her heart lurched. She dropped the ladle she had been using, stew sloshing onto the floorboards, and ran upstairs. There lay Eliza, the 7-year-old girl with her rag doll always clutched tight. But now the doll lay forgotten at her side. Eliza's face was flushed scarlet, damp with sweat. Her small body trembled beneath the quilt, chest rising too fast, breath rasping like sandpaper. Clara pressed a hand to the child's forehead. It burned, the heat of fever, not the heat of summer. "Ethan!" she cried. The blacksmith came thundering up the stairs, boots striking heavy. His face, always so sure in front of fire and iron, twisted in panic. "What's wrong with her?" "Fever," Clara whispered, holding the cloth against Eliza's brow. "A high one." Ethan's hands hovered, rough and helpless. He looked at his daughter as if brute strength might force the sickness away. But all the iron he had ever bent, all the nails he had ever forged, none of it could touch the fire burning his child. "Damn it," he muttered, pacing. His chest rose and fell too fast. I don't know what to do." Clara swallowed hard. For a moment, her own fear threatened to drown her. She thought of the 3 small graves from her past wooden crosses half swallowed by weeds. She remembered the helplessness, the way she had begged God to spare them. 3 times, the silence had answered back. But Eliza was not hers to lose. And yet, looking at the child's small hands and the way her lips quivered as she fought for breath, Clara felt something ignite in her chest. A vow. She forced her voice steady. "I do." Clara moved quickly. She fetched a basin, boiled water over the fire, searched through the cupboard for herbs. She remembered her mother's teachings, whispered long ago beside a hearth. Willow bark for pain, mint leaves for cooling, wild sage to drive sickness from the lungs. Her fingers worked fast, crushing herbs with the bottom of a cup, mixing them into a bitter brew. She spooned it carefully into Eliza's mouth, coaxing her to swallow. The girl whimpered but obeyed, her small hands clutching Clara's sleeve as if it were a lifeline. Ethan hovered nearby, fists clenched. "Is it enough?" Clara didn't answer. She wrung the cloth in cool water, laid it across Eliza's burning forehead, and whispered lullabies she hadn't sung in years. Her voice cracked, but she sang anyway. Old songs of rivers and stars, the kind her own mother had sung when the world seemed too heavy. The hours stretched long. Samuel and Peter stood in the doorway, too frightened to enter but unable to leave. "Is she gonna die?" Samuel asked, voice brittle, betraying the man he tried to be. Clara turned, her face pale but steady. "Not if I can help it." The night deepened. The house grew still, except for Eliza's labored breathing. Clara stayed by her side, never moving, dabbing sweat from the girl's brow, whispering prayers into the dark. Her back ached, her knees throbbed, but she would not yield. When dawn came, pale and weak, Clara nearly collapsed. But then Eliza stirred. Her breathing slowed, her cheeks cooled. She opened her eyes, glassy but aware, and whispered a single word. "Mama?" The sound struck Clara like thunder. Her chest seized, tears spilling before she could stop them. She bent down, pressing her lips to Eliza's hair. "Yes, child, I'm here." Behind her, Ethan exhaled hard, shoulders sagging, his face twisted, not with pride, not with strength, but with the raw relief of a man who had stood on the edge of losing everything and been pulled back. He turned away quickly, stepping into the hall, but Clara saw the tremor in his hands. That morning, the children would not leave her side. Samuel, usually so guarded, fetched water without being asked. Peter climbed into her lap, laying his head against her chest as if it had always been his place. And Eliza, still weak, refused to release Clara's hand, her rag doll forgotten at the foot of the bed. When Clara finally went downstairs, exhausted, she found something waiting on the table, a mug of tea, steam curling upward. Beside it lay a note, in stiff, uneven handwriting. "Thank you." No name. But she knew. Her throat tightened. She lifted the mug, sipped the bitter brew, and felt warmth spread through her chest, not from the tea, but from the acknowledgement. From the man who rarely spoke, rarely showed, but now had given her something that weighed more than gold. The days that followed carried a gentler rhythm. The children, once suspicious, now sought her. Samuel lingered nearby when she needed bread, pretending he only wanted to watch, but sometimes handing her the flour jar without being asked. Eliza leaned against her hip when she cooked, humming quietly. And Peter trailed after her shadow, giggling when she turned suddenly to scoop him up. Even Ethan seemed changed. He still spoke little, still worked long hours at the forge, but when he entered the house, the silence between him and Clara no longer felt empty. It felt like a space waiting to be filled. But the town had not forgotten. When Clara next went to the market, whispers rose. "There she is, the cursed widow. Surprised Miller ain't dead yet, living with her." And then, sharper than all the rest, the voice of her former mother-in-law. "Well, if it isn't Clara Barnes, the barren ghost." Beside her the new wife smirked, lace gloves smoothing over her belly as if already swollen with life. "I'll give him a son. Strong. Not like her." The crowd laughed. Clara's chest tightened, shame burning her skin. She turned to leave, but Ethan was there. He stepped forward, boots firm in the dust. His voice came low, steady, dangerous. "She's the only one who gets my daughter to sleep. The only one who keeps food on my table. The only one who makes my house feel like home. You don't speak her name again." Silence. The crowd faltered. The women's smiles withered. Ethan took Clara's hand, calloused, steady, and led her away. On the wagon ride home, she whispered, "Why?" His eyes stayed on the road. "Because you're mine to protect. That's enough." Her heart clenched, not in shame, but in something terrifying and tender all at once. That night, as she tucked Peter into bed, He yawned and murmured, "Good night, Mama." The word settled into Clara's chest like a seed into soil, small but unshakable. She kissed his hair, whispering back, "Good night, child." Outside, sparks flew from the forge into the dark. Inside, in a small wooden room, a woman once called Cursed carried a new name, not Baron, not Ghost, but Mama. Part 4. Conflict and Defense. The air of autumn carried with it the smell of wood smoke and the bite of frost, crisp against the skin. The fields had turned, the last wildflowers bowing under the weight of cold nights, and the forge rang once more with the steady rhythm of hammer and anvil. Life inside the Miller household felt different than it had months before. The children no longer treated Clara as a stranger. Samuel lingered by her side when she baked bread, offering flour without being asked, pretending it was nothing. Eliza followed her through the garden, humming softly, her rag doll forgotten in a corner. And Peter, bright, mischievous Peter, ran to her arms each evening, as though she had always been there, waiting. To them, she was Mama Clara, and though they spoke it shy at first, the name soon grew bold on their tongues, worn smooth as truth. But while the forge and garden knew her as mother, the town beyond its fences remembered differently. When Clara walked the market street, whispers bloomed like weeds. Old women shook their heads, young wives smirked, men spat tobacco in the dirt and muttered the word "cursed," as though it had never died. The children of other households pointed and laughed, and Samuel came home with bruised knuckles after defending her name. The gossip did not fade, it only turned sharper as Clara's presence in Ethan's house grew stronger. Among the voices that kept her chained to her past, one man's shadow lingered heavier than the rest. Jed Carter, a trapper by name. Though no one had seen him sell a pelt in years, Jed was a creature of whiskey and resentment. His teeth yellowed, his eyes pale as soured milk, and his hands were known better for fists than labor. He had laughed loudest the day Ethan dropped his pouch of coins for Clara. A fool's bargain. He had barked, "Iron can't hammer out bad luck, Miller." And when Ethan ignored him, Jed's pride curdled into something uglier. That autumn, his words grew filthier, his stares longer. He lingered by the well when Clara fetched water, his grin crooked. "How's the curse treating you, pretty thing?" he'd sneer. Clara quickened her steps, never answering, heart pounding like a trapped bird. She told no one, not even Ethan. Some fears were easier buried than spoken, and part of her still believed the shame was hers to carry. But shame cannot hold forever. One October night, the weight of it broke. The moon was pale and thin, veiled by a sky of restless clouds. The forge had gone quiet, its fire banked low, the children asleep in their quilts. Clara stepped into the yard with her shawl wrapped tight, a bucket in her hand, breath rising white in the cold. She hummed softly, steadying herself against the silence. But the silence did not last. "Well, if it ain't the blacksmith's bargain bride." The voice slurred from the fence line. Clara froze, the bucket slipping from her hand to the dirt. Jed Carter leaned against the post, bottle dangling, his grin glinting in the moonlight. His shirt hung open, chest matted with dirt and sweat. "It's late, Jed," Clara said, forcing her voice steady. "Go home." He pushed off the fence, staggering closer. "Home's empty. Thought I'd find company." His eyes ran over her, vile and unblinking. "They say you're cursed, but maybe you just need the right man to break it." Clara stepped back, pulse thundering in her ears. "Leave." Jed chuckled, the sound crawling over her skin. "Or what? You'll cry to Miller? He can't be at your side every hour." His hand shot out, sudden and iron strong, clamping around her wrist. "Come on, little dove. Don't fight. Won't take long." She gasped, yanking, the bruise blooming beneath his grip. She opened her mouth to scream, and the night exploded. Ethan came from the barn like thunder, boots pounding, fists already raised. His punch landed square against Jed's jaw, with a crack that echoed off the cabin walls. Jed staggered, spit blood, and roared, lunging. They collided in a storm of fists and curses, bodies crashing to the dirt. Clara stumbled back, clutching her wrist, shawl falling away. Ethan's rage was wordless, forged in years of silence. His fists hammered like his anvil, steady, merciless. Jed swung wild, drunken, his strikes landing clumsy against Ethan's ribs. But the blacksmith did not falter. He drove Jed into the dirt again and again until the man lay gasping, face bloodied, teeth broken, curses spilling weak from his lips. Ethan loomed above him, chest heaving, knuckles torn open. His voice was low, dangerous. "If you ever come near her again, you'll leave this ground in a box." Jed spat, rolled to his knees, and crawled into the darkness, vanishing into the trees. Silence fell heavy. Clara stood trembling, her wrist throbbing where Jed's hand had bruised her. Ethan turned, sweat and blood streaking his face. For a long breath, they only stared at each other, the distance between what had almost happened and what had been stopped. Then Ethan crossed it. He pulled the kerchief from his neck and wrapped it carefully around her wrist, his rough hands gentle. "No one touches you," he said, voice shaking with the fury he had unleashed. "Not unless I say." Clara's tears spilled, not from fear, not from shame, but from the terrifying warmth of being defended, not as property, but as something worth protecting. Inside, she boiled water, cleaned his knuckles, pressing cloth against broken skin. He winced, but did not pull away. She whispered, "You didn't have to." "I did." His gaze caught hers, fierce and steady. "He should never have touched you." Her breath broke. "No one's ever fought for me." He looked down at her blistered hands, her trembling fingers tending his wounds. His voice softened, almost breaking. "Then you've never had someone who knew your worth." That night, she lay awake, listening to the forge's silence. For the first time in years, her fear had shifted, not of being unloved, but of being loved too much, too suddenly, in a world that could still tear it away. But the world had not finished testing her. Days later, as she walked the market street, another ghost rose from her past. Thomas Jennings, her former husband, once smug with pride, now hollowed by failure. His shoulders sagged, his hat crushed in his hands. The young wife he had once paraded through town was gone, cast out when she proved barren after all. Whispers of her infidelity trailed like dust. He stepped into Clara's path, eyes desperate. "Clara," he breathed, "I was wrong. You're the only woman who ever cared for me. Come back, please." The world tilted. For a moment she saw him as he once was, the man she had begged to defend her, the man who had cast her out instead. Shame flared like a fresh wound. But behind her she could almost hear the forge ringing, smell the soil of her stubborn garden, feel the weight of Peter's arms when he called her Mama. Her voice came steady, stronger than she thought possible. "I have children now, children who call me mother. I have a man who never asks what I cannot give, only what I choose to share. My house is full of laughter and warmth. I would rather sweep ashes for Ethan Miller than sit in your parlor as a porcelain doll." Thomas's face burned with shame. He tried to speak, but no words came. Clara walked past him, the crowd parting as though even gossip dared not touch her. Across the street, Ethan stood with a sack of nails in his hand. He had seen it all. Their eyes met no pride, no claim, only respect and gratitude. That night, Clara wove a wreath of wildflowers and set it on the table. Ethan looked at it, then at her, the corners of his mouth softening, though no words came. Samuel whispered to Eliza, "Papa fought for her." Their awe was plain, their certainty growing that she was no longer curse but kin. Clara sat by the fire, with Peter curled in her lap, his small voice murmuring, "Papa says, no one can hurt you, so you're ours now." Her throat tightened, tears falling silent. She kissed his hair, whispering, "Yes, child, I am yours." And in that moment she knew. The bruise on her wrist was no longer shame, but a badge. Proof not of violence, but of choice. Ethan's choice to protect, the children's choice to love, her own choice to stay. She was not cursed. She was not bought. She was chosen. Part 5. Resolution and Symbol. Winter pressed hard on the valley. Snow drifted against the blacksmith's door, smoke curled from the chimney, and inside, the forge lay cold, more often than hot. Work slowed. Food grew scarce. Clara rose early each morning, wrapping herself in a shawl against the frost. She watched the children count potatoes like marbles, their small fingers lingering on each one. She heard their stomachs growl at night, though none complained. Even the youngest had learned to be brave when there was nothing left to cry over. Ethan worked longer, ate less. His shoulders stooped with quiet defeat. He rarely spoke, but Clara could see it, the fear that the land, the forge, and his family might fail together. But Clara would not surrender. Not now. At first light, she filled every bucket and basin with water from the deep well. She wrapped her hands in cloth, tied a scarf around her head, and marched to the frozen patch of soil behind the house. With a hoe she broke the earth. It was hard as stone, refusing to yield. But she dug anyway. Each strike cracked like thunder in the cold air. She turned the dirt, loosened it, made room for roots, even where life seemed unwelcome. Neighbors shook their heads. Waste of time. Nothing grows in winter. Clara ignored them. She sang lullabies under her breath as she worked, breath misting in the frigid air. Her song was not for the soil, but for herself, for courage. Day after day, she tended the patch. She poured water, whispered prayers, planted seeds scavenged from old sacks. She knelt until her knees froze numb, until her fingers blistered, until she could no longer feel her toes. One evening, Ethan stumbled through the door, pale and trembling. He collapsed against the wall. "Just tired," he rasped. But when Clara pressed her hand to his brow, she felt the fire of fever. For 2 nights, Ethan burned. His breaths came ragged, his face gray beneath the sweat. Clara sat at his side, wiping his brow, coaxing broth between his lips, whispering stories of warm bread and spring gardens. Her own body ached with exhaustion, but she did not leave him. In the darkest hours, when the wind howled like a ghost against the shutters, Ethan muttered in his fever, "Don't leave me, Clara. Not you too." Her breath caught. She bent close, lips brushing his temple. "I'm not going anywhere. Not when I am needed, and here I am needed." By dawn, the fever broke. His eyes fluttered open. He found her still there, hair undone, face pale, hands raw from digging soil but steady. "You look like hell," he croaked. She laughed softly. "You should see yourself." Outside, the garden was not dead. Tiny green shoots pushed stubbornly through the soil, reaching toward the pale Sunday. A week later, Samuel burst through the door, shouting, "Clara, there's a tomato!" They all ran to the patch, and there it was, small, red, stubborn, clinging to the vine like defiance itself. Clara touched it with reverent fingers. Ethan stood beside her, silent, staring at the impossible fruit. "How?" he whispered. She looked at him, voice low but firm. "Because not everything worth keeping comes easy." He glanced at her blistered hands, and for the first time, bent down and kissed each knuckle, soft as falling snow. That night, they cut the tomato into slivers thinner than coins. Each child received a piece. They chewed slowly, swearing it was the best thing they had ever tasted. Later, as the children slept in a heap before the fire, Ethan reached for Clara's hand. "I don't have much left to give," he murmured. "The land is failing. My strength fades. All I have is this place, these children, and you." She turned to him, eyes gentle. "Then that is more than enough. Because before you, I had a name no one wanted to say. Now I have children who call me Mama, a garden that remembers my hands, and a man who asked me to stay even in drought. Ethan kissed her knuckles again. You never needed rain to grow something beautiful. Years rolled forward like wagons on a dusty road. The garden grew wider, wilder. Corn, beans, onions, sunflowers tall enough to hide behind. Children grew into adults, bringing spouses and grandchildren back to the house that once held silence. One autumn afternoon, a grandson asked Ethan, "Grandpa, why do you never call it just Clara's garden?" The old blacksmith walked him to the gate. Above it, carved carefully into the wood, were the words, "Not cursed, chosen." The boy frowned. She wasn't cursed? Ethan's eyes softened. No, she gave me more than blood ever could. She gave me a life worth living. When Clara passed, they buried her beneath the oak tree at the edge of the garden, where she had once sung lullabies to seedlings. On the stone, Ethan carved with his own hand, "She did not bear my blood, but she gave birth to the rest of my life." Every morning after, Ethan sat by that grave, hands folded, whispering words only the soil could hear, until one day he did not come out. They buried him beside her. The garden never stopped growing. And long after the railroad bent around the hill, long after neighbors forgot their names, travelers still passed the old fence and read the sign, "Not for sale," because sometimes the land remembers those who refuse to leave. And sometimes love blooms strongest in the dust. If this story touched something quiet inside your heart, then you've found the right place. Out here, in the untamed heart of the American West, love is never easy, but it is always worth it. Subscribe and ride with me again into the next tale whispered by wind and fire.